The very first Ruby conference that I went to was pretty great, and one of the things that made it great was I got to see Rich Kilmer give a talk on something called The Contract, right? That was it, which is a pretty amazing story, and hopefully Rich is going to have a pretty amazing story for us today. But you probably have heard Rich's name. He's one of the people behind Ruby Central. See what an effect Ruby Central has on things. So he's one of the people who puts on RailsConf and RubyConf every year. So I'm really excited that we have him here speaking to us today, and he's going to kick us off with talking about MacRuby and hot cocoa.
I'm from the East Coast, so I've been awake forever. Yeah. I didn't travel the furthest. Need to be in like, oh my gosh, double mic. Okay, excellent. All right, I am going to be talking today about, I'll just talk really low now. Is that better? All right, I'll be talking today about MacRuby and hot cocoa. How many folks here have heard about MacRuby? Okay, then I'll sit back down. So, no. I started this, I guess, when I first heard about this project, I was with Laurent Sansoniti from Apple. And I believe it was MacRuby. Well, let's just go into the timeline here about Apple and Ruby specifically. Ruby first shipped with OS X in Panther. That's my name for Panther. But in Panther back all the way in 2002. And if anyone remembers that version of Ruby, it didn't work. You couldn't build native extensions because it was so badly packaged in the operating system that we all wrote blog posts about how to actually get Ruby to work right on your OS X machine, even though it was there. Laurent came along in OS X 10.4 and actually packaged Ruby right. And so it was around 2004, I got this email from some guy in France. He's Belgian, but he lived in France. But anyway, and he was saying, hey, I'm now responsible for Ruby and OS X. And, I want to get Ruby in there and everything, and I want to make it really good. And so he started working on it then, and really in 2007, he said, well, we want to package up Ruby gems and get it into OS X. And we were so excited. I mean, it's kind of like a dream to actually have things like Ruby gems, Rails, and all these things actually ship inside of an operating system from a vendor. So Apple's the only one doing that. I don't know why Microsoft doesn't do it, but, whatever. And but in 2007, when Leopard shipped, it shipped with pretty much a stack that you could use without having to rebuild Ruby for the first time. You could actually sit there and as a matter of fact, I continue for all my Rails and Ruby development just to use the one that Apple provides. It's really great. They patch it and they do ongoing releases. And, there's an effort afoot to get a new version of the operating system out sometime this year. I don't speak for Apple, so I don't have to actually be like, I can't give you dates. But I can't give you dates because I don't exactly know when Snow Leopard ships. But Snow Leopard will include Ruby 1.8.7, the latest version of Ruby gems. I think it's a Rails 2.2. I don't know exactly what the version number is, but they'll upgrade it when it comes out. And, of course, Ruby Cocoa. And I'll talk a little bit more about Ruby Cocoa as we go in. So Apple's had this kind of ongoing history with Ruby. And then they started this project towards the end of 2007. So it was at RubyConf 2007. Forget where that was at now. Charlotte. Yeah, it was in Charlotte. That's right. Mats and Laurent, I got them together and they sat down. And Laurent started talking about what he wanted to do with this MacRuby thing. He wanted to be able to make Ruby run even better on OS X. And so the project started at the end of 2007. So this is in December of 2007. So it's really about a year and 4 months old. It's not a very old project, and that's what I'll be talking about today. So the goal of Apple and is to make the Mac the best platform for Ruby developers. Most Ruby developers use the Mac because we're lemmings And no. But no, I mean, but a lot of people do use the Mac already. And, Apple, I think, stumbled upon that, right? You go to a conference, or like a Rails conference, and I remember Laurent going to his first, I think it was just a Ruby conf, but he said, everyone here has Macs. We're like, duh, right? So we've tried to get Apple to sponsor something, but they don't sponsor anything. But then when Apple people actually do show up at like a Rails conf, they go, everyone here has Macs. And we're like, whatever. And just, so we'll use your machines, and you guys go sell music on iTunes. So Apple has this other goal, and this was Laurent's stated goal, to make Ruby a first-class Cocoa programming language on OS X. And this is actually a big deal. So back here, making it so that, OS X is a great platform for Ruby developers is one thing, but actually making Ruby a first-class Cocoa programming language, Cocoa, I'm using Cocoa there to basically say program anything on your Mac really well. This is actually a pretty tall order. And I'm going to actually scratch that and say the best Cocoa programming language, right? So let's throw away that Objective-C thing, disregard that language, and any other language that happens to be on the Mac. It was kind of sad that Python had great OS X support before Ruby did, but now we're going to just blow past them. Anyway, so to make Ruby the best Cocoa programming language is a pretty tall order. This is like an OS X stack, right? So we have the Darwin OS underneath at the bottom, graphics, media, application frameworks, and this user experience. From a language perspective, the way Apple has implemented these things, there's kind of an overlap between Objective-C and C. Objective-C, basically wraps a lot of their higher-level APIs, and a lot of them are on the UI side are actually all written in Objective-C. Then there's a lot that's actually written in C as well. Ruby's been able to interface with these for quite a while. And, of course, Ruby's been able to integrate with C, but to actually integrate with Objective-C is a little different. There was an effort that actually began before Apple even got interested in this by Hisa-san, actually in 2001, called RubyCoco. So I don't know how many of you, even back then, I actually was one of the first people to actually play with RubyCoco, and I remember, I think it was the second, early release he released, I actually went and ran the installer for RubyCoco. And it was one of those things, this was before Ruby Gems and everything. So you install RubyCoco, you download the library, the tarball, and you do gosh, there's no rake. It was, you actually had to build things. It was fun. But I actually ran the installer, and it deleted everything in my, I think it was like /user directory. And it was funny because I ran it. No, it was the /library. That was it. Like like all my library files were gone. And I went and I looked in the directory, and there was nothing. It RMRF'd the entire library directory. And I'm like, how is my Mac running? There's no files here. Apple shadows all those things. So actually, if you delete them all, you reboot, they're all back. It's great. So, and then I quickly emailed Hisa-san and said, fix that. And so he felt really bad. I think I was the only one hit by that. But Apple actually shipped RubyCoco with this. And RubyCoco is a bridge between the Ruby runtime and the Objective-C runtime. And it's mainly written in C. And so it's kind of a Ruby extension to do this. And it was bundled with OS X Leopard. And it's stable. Apple supports and will support RubyCoco and RubyCoco applications. They actually have some production applications that they have built on it, and so they will actually do this. This is what, and I'm sorry if you can't read the text, but this is what RubyCoco's Hello World looks like. Isn't that cool? But what's really neat is you can actually do this. And so, when you look at this thing here that says, button, what is this? Content view, add subview, button. That right there is actually calling Objective-C methods from within Ruby. But one of the issues, and I'll talk about this in the next slide, but if you see this calling convention here, init with context rect underscore style mass underscore backing underscore defer, right? Objective-C has an interesting way of thinking about methods. In Ruby, we have a method like foo, right? And we can look up the method with using the symbol foo. In Objective-C, parameters are named and ordered. And so an actual selector to select a method name is like init with content rect, that's hard to say, colon, style mask, colon, backing, colon, defer, colon. That whole thing together is the selector. That's saying, what is the method? That is the method, that whole thing all together. Ruby doesn't have that concept, right? Ruby says, oh, okay, well, I'll have a method name, and then I'll have a bunch of variables. And Rails introduced, using like a first, parameter, and then everything else was a hash. And everybody thinks, oh, name parameters, right? Well, they're not named parameters, but everyone kind of thinks of them that way because they've got, key value, key value, key value. But this was GoGaRuCo, and that thing right there, that calling convention, some of Coco's methods have like 15 parameters. So, just typing that out is like, But it is cool. This will actually do hello world. I'm sorry, I almost hit him in the eye with a laser pointer. I apologize for that. And it's got a thing here that, you set up a controller and you actually have target action and everything else. And it actually lets you build Coco applications in Ruby and get to a lot of the frameworks. So that's GoGaRuCo. But here are some problems with it. For one thing, it was a bridge. So you had the Ruby runtime and the Objective-C runtime. And, bridges, in this instance, bridges had tolls associated with them. And they cost a lot of money. And so that was kind of lame. The money was speed. It's a very slow thing. Messaging syntax is different. That's that thing I was telling you about. That whole underscore convention for naming a selector was just wretched. And so that kind of sucked. Ruby uses green threads, right? Coco and Objective-C and everything like that, it's thread safe, and you have native threads and everything. Ruby didn't. 186, at least, had green threads. And then additionally, it had, it's not reentrant. Ruby itself is not reentrant. As a matter of fact, in 1.9, you can use native threads, but they have a global lock on the interpreter. So only one native thread can enter Ruby's runtime at a time, even under 1.9. So that's a problem with GoGaRuCo right now. And you had two runtimes and two garbage collectors, right? Both of them were garbage collected. And so when you created an object on one side, on the other side of the bridge, you actually had to create another object, a proxy object on this side to that object over there. And then you had to worry about garbage collection on both sides, and it was tricky, and and so you consume memory on both sides, and so there were some problems with it. Again, you could build apps, but there were certain performance things that you weren't going to be building GarageBand with it. I'll put it that way. And that's all of our goals, is to build GarageBand. So enter MacRuby. MacRuby began as an idea. Laurent looked at the Objective-C runtime, and he said, Objective-C is very close to Ruby's runtime. As a matter of fact, they both come from a Smalltalk heritage, and so that's not too surprising. He said, I believe that I can actually unify Ruby's runtime on top of Objective-C's runtime, if you want to think of it that way. And he started with Ruby 1.9. And this is before Ruby 1.9, of course, released. So he's been chasing Ruby 1.9 as they've been doing things. It actually still includes using Yarv from Ruby 1.9, the parser, the standard library. What he did, though, is he replaced the garbage collector of Ruby 1.9 with the garbage collector in Objective-C 2.0, which is a full generational garbage collector, yada, yada, yada. It's really nice and speedy and things like that. He also replaced some of the built-ins, and I'll show that a little bit, with Core Foundation. So technically, Core Foundation is not under Objective-C 2.0. Core Foundation is a bunch of C code, but I just put them under there for sake of pretty slides. And so the built-ins were kind of rewritten in order to do this. And I'll show this. But so hash is, Ruby's hash is actually an NS mutable dictionary. Array is an NS mutable array. String is a CF string becomes an NS string. In other words, those are the Objective-C counterparts. And so he merged these two object models together. As a matter of fact, every Ruby class is an Objective-C class. You can actually all this stuff's at the lower part of the screen. You can actually just load in an Objective-C class and use it just from Ruby. You don't have to do anything magic. It's effectively a big single namespace, if you want to think of it that way. And every Ruby object is an Objective-C object. But what's great is you can actually do things like you can in Ruby to Objective-C. You can add methods to instances of objects at runtime. In MacRuby, to Objective-C classes and objects. And so you get the dynamism of Ruby with the runtime of Objective-C and the speed of that, which is very nice. And every Ruby method is an Objective-C method. So again, when you had a bridge, you'd have Ruby method dispatching, and then you'd go over and you'd have Objective-C method dispatching. In MacRuby, it's a single method dispatcher, and it's actually the Objective-C method dispatcher, and it's very, very fast. So that's what MacRuby, and currently MacRuby is at 0.4, and you can build applications with MacRuby like you could with RubyCoco right now. So here's the hello world. It's changed a lot, you know. But no, I mean, the hello world, the specific thing is you say like framework Coco. So a new kernel method was added called framework. And so when you say framework Coco, it actually loads up all of the constants, all the classes, right, for Coco. And it builds the entire constant space and everything else like that. And it's very fast for having to do that. But when you actually call a method now, like init with context rect, you notice I pass a rectangle there. And then I say stylemask : So this is Ruby 1.9's way of actually creating a hash. So Laurent actually uses the hash syntax, but in this instance, the order is important. So what he does is in the parsing, if he sees that this is a hash, he actually tries to find an Objective-C selector that matches that, and he uses those key values. So that could actually be a traditional hash, :stylemask, equal greater than this, and these constants are automatically brought in for you. Backing, points to that. This is just Ruby 1.9's ability to be able to do, a shorthand to being able to do a hash. But this looks very, very similar, MacRuby hello world. But it is nicer calling syntax, and there's no bridging cost. And it's a unified garbage collection. So there's a lot of value in MacRuby. But it's still a lot of code to say hello world, and that kind of sucks. So enter hot Coco. So hot Coco is my idiomatic Ruby API. If you look at those Objective-C classes, most of the time that you spend in that is in configuring things, right? I mean, you're instantiating a window, you're passing it crap, you're setting different kind of constants on it. Constant names, because it's in C, are global, so they're long, right? Because they're all globally unique, so they're very, very long. It's a C code. And so some of these things are atrocious, like 30-character long, constant names. It's awesome. And then you're wiring things together. You're adding subviews to views, and so you're configuring things. You're wiring them together, and a lot of Coco code is spent doing that. A lot of Objective-C code is spent just doing that, just wiring things together and configuring them. And so we said there has to be a better way. And hot Coco is just a library. It's just a library of Ruby code that tries to simplify the process of configuring and wiring together Objective-C and Coco classes. It's not everything. It's just a thing. And it's just a library to simplify this. So I'll show you what happens when you start using hot Coco. The first thing is, and this was our MacRuby hello world, you get rid of framework Coco and you say require hot Coco and include hot Coco. So hot Coco brings in a module, hot Coco. It just so happens to include Coco. That's why I could take that out. But if you need another thing like QTKit for QuickTime or WebKit, you just say framework WebKit after that. But here I require hot Coco, and I include this module just so I have things within the namespace of my app right now. So let's look at how to refactor the win equals nswindow.alloc init with context rect blah, 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 right? Boom. So what this is calling a window method. It looks magic. It's totally not. Win equals window, so it's a window method. The window method actually comes from hot Coco. That's why I included it. So it's just a mixed-in method from the module hot Coco. Window, I'm passing title and frame. So I use symbols. So now this is nice because it's Ruby symbols, and all the Rails people feel happy because we've got, it's a big hash, and so it looks just like Rails. And no, but what's important here is window returns an NS window. It's not some bizarre thing. It's an NS window. Just as if you said NS window dot, alloc and it blah, blah, blah. It returns an NS window. That NS window is decorated with some stuff. In other words, we mix in a module to the instance of that NS window, but it is an NS window instance, which means you can call any NS window method you want on that if you know the API. So I'm not trying to obscure this thing. I'm not trying to, shoes, which we're going to hear about actually at this conference, very awesome cross-platform UI framework, it takes some similar patterns, simplifying the way of building UIs, but it does that by creating kind of a cross-platform set of methods that you can call on things, right? Here, I'm trying to not hide the fact that this is an NS window, because there's a lot on that class, hundreds of methods, and sometimes you need them on OS X. So if you're building a very powerful desktop application, you need full capability. So let's actually build a button. So here I created a button, and I set the bezel style, rounded bezel style, and I set the title to hello. And then I centered it. Turns to that. So there I'm creating an NS button, titling it hello, and then I have a layout. So layout is something that we built to be able to do kind of basic layout management, kind of a flow layout with aligning center and gridding and various things like that, and you can expand width and height and stuff. So it's kind of a GTK borrowed layout system, not the be all and end all, but it works. And then when add B, that's our syntax for add this to that thing, or in other words add subview. So that places the button on the window. And then we've got this code down at the bottom, which is just it just wants to respond when somebody clicks on the button. That becomes a block. On action, you have a block. And my mic went dead. But now it didn't. Very cool. And now it's back. And anyway, so on action you pass a block. Behind the scenes, it's actually creating it's taking the block and that you pass in here, and it's actually setting that to be the target action of that thing, just like in Objective-C. It just does it with a Ruby block, so it looks pretty. And then you've got this nasty little app equals application, shared application stuff that gets replaced by a little block, application do. That is actually the hot cocoa hello world, a lot smaller, right? So that's why folks are excited about hot cocoa, because it does simplify the configuration of these classes. This does not mean that you don't have to go read Apple's documentation for how to configure a window, things like that. But it does simplify things quite a bit. And, folks are starting to actually build these things. I took a little bit of a hiatus working on hot cocoa because the ongoing work in the core runtime kind of distracted me a bit, and life interceded, blah, blah, blah. But we're going to get back into doing more hot cocoa stuff very soon. So hot cocoa is two things, by the way. It's a library, and it's a command from the command line. The command line, when you actually say hot cocoa foo, actually generates an app for you. So this is like the Rails command. You do Rails foo, and you get a Rails app. Similar idea. Here it just builds a set of files. There's only 5 of them right now. And but from those, then you go in and builds a rake file. You do macrake. And by the way, when you install MacRuby, it prefaces everything with Mac, just so that it doesn't actually overwrite your Ruby. So it's MacIRB, MacRuby, MacRake. And but if you go into that directory and say MacRake, you've got an application. It'll actually build a .app file. And you can actually package that .app file and give it to somebody. And actually, we've made it so that you don't have to actually have MacRuby on that other machine. It drops the framework into the app when you do it. So it lets you actually build apps from the command line. So I'm going to actually show some of this. And boy, where are we at here? Right. So we'll start with this little thing. This is Hot Console, and Hot Console can actually be found on GitHub if you look for it. Hot Console is written in hot cocoa, and it's IRB. Right. So it's kind of nifty. It's IRB. But what's really neat is this is actually WebKit. So this whole thing is actually WebKit. So if I do, gosh, what, that's, hash. Oh, NS Mutable Dictionary. Weird, right? Should be a hash. But this is actually kind of neat. So you do that.methods. It's, a hash is methods. So it just looks like a Ruby hash. But if you do this, so you actually have command recall too, which is nice. methods true, comma true, the world's going to change, and you're going to get all the methods that you get on an NS mutable dictionary. And there's a lot. So it's pretty substantial. So you don't want to do that often, but it's nice. And an array is an NS mutable array. And actually, here you've got an NS mutable string. So these are the way of unifying these things. It behaves just like a Ruby 1.9 string. It does all the encoding and everything else like that. But it is underneath an NS mutable string. It just aliases the classes. So string is actually NS mutable string. That's how that works. I mean, string is just an alias for that real class, which is called NS mutable string. So that's the merging together of those things. But what's nice about this is I can actually do things like, because this is in hot cocoa, I can say W equals window title hello, and I get a window, which is kind of neat. And of course it returns that window instance. And then I can say B equals button title push me, and then append the button to the window, and there's push me. And then I can say B dot on action hello. And then when you actually push me, it says hello, right? So yeah, so it actually is. I mean, this hot console thing is really neat to explore things with. Right. So yeah, we'll not talk about the iPhone for a second. Yeah, trust me. But anyway, I don't have a lot of time to do demo stuff, but what I do want to talk about is this. And by the way, just real quick, when you install MacRuby under developer examples, Ruby, MacRuby, hot cocoa, there's a whole bunch of examples, and calculator example and various other kinds of things that you can look at. But I want to quickly actually talk about this. So, Laurent wasn't satisfied with having merged the Objective-C and Ruby 1.9 runtimes, because Laurent really wants to replace, basically all of OS X's applications that are written in Objective-C with Ruby applications. And he wants to do that inside of Apple and basically get rid of Objective-C as a language. No, he doesn't. I'm not putting those words in his mouth. He actually loves Objective-C and he codes in it all the time. I, however, do want that to happen. And But over Christmas break, I love the way he does this. Over Christmas break, Laurent decided, I'm going to try something. And so he started building a new virtual machine for Ruby, for MacRuby. And he based it on LLVM. So between then and now, that makes roughly 4 months, kind of 3.5-ish, whatever. He actually has a functioning replacement for YARV that is LLVM. And the amazing thing about this, so if you notice, YARV is now grayed out. MacRuby no longer uses YARV. Still uses the parser. Still uses the standard library, so that's there. We're actually replacing the disk and socket I/O with Objective-C to speed that up. If you look at socket, which is actually part of the standard library, it's all being replaced with Objective-C code as we speak. And so we're still using the Objective-C garbage collector, but LLVM takes the Ruby abstract syntax tree and generates from it machine code that talks directly to the Objective-C code, meaning it's all machine code. So the JIT is actually just building machine code. It does not pass Go. It is fast. And there's a lot of optimizations. He's got tail call recursion or optimization in there, so that if you actually at the end of a method call yourself, it actually optimizes that. So you can actually loop 50 million times on a method, and it will work, and you won't get a Stack Overflow. It's right now, I'll just throw the number out, it's between 4 to 5 times faster than 1.9. 1.9 is fast compared to 1.8. I think it's like 4 to 5 times faster than 1.8. So we're talking about times, mind you. It's fast. No libffi. Laurent is just about to commit this. Right now, when MacRuby calls out to C code, it uses the fast function interface to call, and that is being replaced by generated machine code. So when he wants to call a call in Objective-C, he actually just generates the machine code to make that call. There is no libffi anymore. The bridge support is being updated, which is something inside of OS 10 that actually in XML describes what a certain library's API looks like. He updated that to be able to support this. And it's already passing a lot of Ruby specs. The goal of this is to pass all of 1.9's Ruby specs. And they're well on their way to doing that. And if that's not enough, he's actually going to make this fully reentrant to support real threading, real native threading, and ultimately support Grand Central. And if anyone knows here in Snow Leopard what Grand Central Dispatch is, it's an ability to actually do very low-level concurrency, very finite pieces of concurrency. You could loop on things that allow something to actually be concurrent, and actually it will create at the lowest level in the operating system these kinds of threads. They're not quite that. They execute concurrently, and it will go across all your cores. His goal is to actually have things automatically generate Grand Central code from the LLVM code. So you're just coding Ruby, and all of a sudden you're running across your 32 cores or whatever we're going to have next year, right? Because I think that this is actually something very important in concurrency, is being able to take advantage of concurrency where it can. We're looking at what syntax makes sense for that, to be able to say this stuff could actually be done in parallel. So that's a goal. It's not there yet, but that's going to be something soon. I would say that this whole runtime, with this VM, will be rock solid before the end of the year. I know it seems like a long time. There's a lot of work. And Laurent's almost doing it himself. He actually done most of it himself. There's a couple of folks that are participating in that, especially the Ruby specs and stuff like that. We thank them. He's also going to work on an ahead-of-time compiler. So that's not there yet, but that means taking Ruby code and compiling it into native code and storing it. So that, to answer the question, could this actually work on a small device that ran a version of OS 10 and had a nice little screen and on a cellular network? The answer to that is, with an AOT, you could do that because there is no Ruby runtime. It's machine code. But you generate the whole thing with Ruby. So there are certain things that preclude running on that device right now. And things like the garbage collector don't exist on that device right now. You have to actually do all your reference counting and things like that. So that is MacRuby, and Hot Cocoa, again, is this layer that simplifies the development against Cocoa APIs. And this MacRuby experimental, I'd say within the next week and a half, is actually going to become trunk. And so right now we're just at the point where once these external calls are fixed, he's actually going to be able to bootstrap Cocoa, in which case he'll be able to replace it all. Yep?
The native gems is a way to, how do you call the support and working with native gems, native code gems?
They just use Ruby C API. That's still there. Ish. I mean, the issue is there's some things that have changed underneath that actually require some gems to be changed a little bit to work on this. But of course, straight Ruby code will work. But if you actually have a native extension, you actually some of them work fine, some of them don't. So I think it's going to be one of those things that it's kind of like 1.9. It required some rewrites of native extensions as well. I know we're running out of time. So if people can catch me afterwards, that would be great. And if you have questions, you can actually Twitter at MacRuby, and Laurent will answer them. But you have to get your question in 140 characters or less, minus MacRuby. But go to our new site, macruby.org, and that we just posted that up there. It's actually built in Webby. Webby is awesome. So go there. We've got a lot of documentation and the like. So. Okay.